I can't hear you. Your microphone's not on.
I have to say that since you bring that up there, I don't think you've seen it, but there is an element of similarity here with a movie called Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And yeah, you probably... There's a line in there where the guy says to the other guy, here's an idea. When you tell a story, have a point. It makes it so much more interesting for the listener.
Okay, all right. That is why Gail's stuff is not overly interesting, yeah. I guess. Yes, okay. Number 5, White quotes himself, pretending he is quoting me. I'm not sure what she's talking about there, but I think we're going... I'm going to play some sections from the program. You can tell for yourself. White's real plight and his misrepresentation of Erasmus, the critical apparatus, and even the name of God are documented herein, which is... She threw in a bunch of stuff at the end that had absolutely nothing to do with our program or anything else, but I guess that's what she's referring to. Then she has a section called Forensic Analysis. Dream on. I have the original recordings sent to me by a listener who was an experienced radio engineer and radio program host. Who do you guess that would be? Judy Penalto. I'll bet you dollars to nuts. How about it, Gail? Is Judy the one who sent you the recordings? Where'd she get them from? Because here's ours. Yes? Let me explain to the young people in the audience. You young kids out there. I did not have to go to a museum to get this. No, my fellow elder at Phoenix Reformed still uses these. In fact, prefers these to even CDs. MP3? Never mind. Anyway, this is called a cassette tape. And this is number 456, New Age Bible Version here. We used to have, you see this yellow thing here? We used to have on the wall in Rich's garage racks, wooden racks of cassette tapes. This was one of them. Up above 2, who made those copy machines? Tascam
or something.
Tascam. Anyways, were they 1-to-1?
Yeah, well, we originally had a 1-to-1, and we got rid of that, and we were able to afford a 1-to-3.
1-to-3, that's right. I knew it was multiple. You put this in the master, you put blanks in the other 3 spots, it does high-speed dubbing. I don't remember how long it took, but it was fairly...
Yeah, it took a couple of minutes.
For C60, C90, whatever.
CD90. We did everything in CD90.
Yeah, so here's the tape that was then put into a machine, MP3'd, and this is what's on Sermon Audio. This very cassette tape right here. All right? We were distributing this long before there was such thing as MP3. Long before there was such thing as Cool Edit 2000, any type of the digitizing programs that exist today.
Before the internet.
Yeah, before the internet, right. So there are copies of these things, hundreds of copies of these things, floating about in boxes all over the world, literally, but certainly in the United States, English-speaking places. So, Rich, where did we get this?
Well, I was not with you on day one. I was working a secular job because that's how I had to make my living at the time.
And pretty much how the ministry survived.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And but day 2 I was able to be there, and as you were doing the show in the other room with Pat Shaughnessy and someone named G.A. Ripplinger on the phone.
Yes. And
I was sitting in the other room with the engineers. And afterwards, a friend of ours who worked there thought it would be a great idea to see if we couldn't afford to set up a show of your own. Revive the dividing line, because during the 90s we really didn't do a dividing line.
We had done it back in the 80s.
We'd done it in the 80s, and then early 90s we couldn't afford to do it anymore.
Right.
And so...
And we hadn't done it on KRDS, we did it on KRTV.
We never did it on KRDS. We had to do it on the cheapest radio stations in town, like the one that the train used to go by in the middle of the show and blare its horn. And
and the one with the I was afraid we were going to fall through the floor.
Yeah.
And that, was it KXEG way out? Was it out
XEG, yeah. Well, I would sit on the other side of the door with the telephone and screen the calls and then slip a note under the door.
Yeah.
And this is the person on the phone. Anyway, so after the show was over, you went in to meet with the general manager, and I talked with the engineers about a problem that they were having with the station, which they were eventually fired over because they felt as Christians they couldn't continue to do this, and kind of those corporate things that go on.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I was handed a tape of both programs back to back. They did 60s, and we always did CD 90s. I took it home, lashed 2 tape recorders together, tape cassette decks,
Right.
and played with my fingers the master that they'd given me, and recorded it on the other one,
And
stopping
you took out the commercials.
stopping it when a commercial came up, and starting it up when the commercial ended, and was able to basically put both programs together on one side of our CD90s.
That's pretty close, because like 47 minutes.
Yeah,
That's
it
pretty
was
tight.
like 46 for I really squeezed in because they always gave us a couple of minutes extra on each side. So it was really a CD92.
Okay.
So that's where that came from. And then in 2003, September of 2003, I took on the MP3 project. Thought it might be a good idea. It might take hold because this real audio stuff that we've been doing wasn't looking good. And now I will say this: I had purchased this thing called a compressor, and that was in our sound studio at the time as we were doing the dividing line. And so that would have been part of the digitizing process of playing the tape in through the soundboard and recording it. So that is the extent of my grand engineering expertise. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very, very much. So that's where it came from. Gail Ripplinger accuses us of editing this, but the edit not she doesn't. She says, "Am I accusing White of altering my voice? No, as I have no idea who did it. But the distortion which occurs in my voice only often makes my responses difficult to discern." Now, just wait a minute. Gail, the reason that this recording is embarrassing to you is not how your voice sounds. It's what you said. Okay? People recognize that when the nice lady on the radio got asked serious questions, she couldn't answer them. Okay? That's the problem. This idea that her voice has been messed with is absurd. Remember, she was on the program for 2 days before I was on. Unopposed. My impression has always been that Pat Shaughnessy was on her side. That he thought she was onto something here. And as I said before, I called in at the end of the second